Sharing my screen with the agenda. Okay, let me know if you can't see that. But this is our agenda for the day, for the morning. We're going to start out like we always do with the constituency updates and task force reports. First up in that category is from the Office of GIS, and Brian is going to give us an update. So Brian, if you're ready.
Yeah, sure. Morning, everybody. Brian Embley, New Jersey Office of GIS. Just to remind everyone, we are recording this, so you can all be YouTube famous. And if anyone misses the meeting or wants to go back to it, go to the forum website and there'll be a link to the recording. So a few announcements from us. First of all, for the forum, I just wanted to remind everybody to please consider becoming a member of the forum. Go to the forum webpage and sign up if you haven't already. It's really easy. You just fill out the form. We need a good email address. And this is also where you can sign up for task forces, right? So once you sign up here, it goes into our database and then you're included on any communications for a particular task force. So please make sure that you do that. This also allows us to track attendance, determine if you're eligible to vote for executive committee members, and maybe even run for the executive committee down the road if you so choose. One more thing that I wanted to remind folks of is, we do have this listserv that kind of serves the GIS community in New Jersey. It's called NJDEP Discuss. You do have to sign up for it manually. It's very easy. You just follow these instructions here. Just send an email to our Major Domo server with this real simple message. And then you'll be on the list and you'll get various notifications from the forum and some from our office. The other nice thing about this, because it's now self-service, is that if you get tired of these messages, you can unsubscribe just as easily. Just send an email with this, to the same address with this word unsubscribe in it. So just a reminder of that. And we are working to replace our email server. Those of you that are familiar with Major Domo, it's very old and crude technology. And at OIT, we're working to replace it with something more modern that we can integrate with our systems a little bit more. So that's forum announcements. A few things from the Office of GIS I wanted to share with you guys. So a reminder, we've started every month to publish out a cut of the roads data for the state, the address points data for the state, and then that also powers the geocoder for the state. So first of the month, we take a cut out of our operational transactional database and then proliferate that out through our map services and downloads and the Engine Open Data site and the geocode service. We take the cut on the first of the month. It can take a couple of days till it actually shows up in the systems as we publish it out. But I am pleased to say that it's the 3rd of March and we have the latest update just went out last night. So if you're interested in roads and address points, those were just published out. The updates were published out last night. And big update on the address points. So we added roughly 300,000 additional address points. Addresses and sub-addresses were added. A number of these were multi-address properties like apartments, mobile, home park, shopping centers, office buildings, things like that. And a great deal of these 300,000 updates were located in counties of Atlantic, Camden, Gloucester, Hudson, Middlesex, and some portions of Bergen, Essex, and Union. So big update there. So if you're in address points, there's some good stuff there. We also released a a cached raster tile service of the 2020 orthos. So the orthos have been out for a while, the 2020s, as a WMS and available for download, but we now have a cached raster tile service. We use that in a lot of apps. Some people have been asking for it. And thanks to DEP for actually generating the cache for us. And then we publish it out on our systems and make it available to you guys. So a couple things coming up with us to look for. We are doing some house cleaning and looking at a number of our map services that have redundant data and cleaning those out. For example, historically, we would serve out data for organizations that didn't have the ability to serve it themselves, like some data from NJ Transit, from New Jersey Pinelands Commission. But as things move forward, those groups are now publishing data themselves directly as map services. So we're kind of pulling that out from some services that we serve and doing some other house cleaning with old data. We are asking you guys to move to our new geocoder. I'm always beating the drum on this, but we have this new geocoder called NJ Geocode. This is the one that just got updated last night. This old one is still around. A lot of people use it. We're leaving it there for migration purposes, but this does not get updated. If you're using this one, you really need to use this one. And all the instructions are here on the geocoding page. So there will be an announcement on the Engine webpage, and we will send out an email to the NJDEP discuss list with details on some of the retirements of content and map services I just talked about. Good way to know when we're doing stuff like this, watch the Engine website, but also subscribe to that NJDEP discuss list that we just looked at. That list is how we send out these notifications that we're changing stuff or retiring stuff with our public map services. And the last one, another upcoming is a couple of municipalities merged down in Camden County. I think Pine Valley is a little teeny tiny golf course community that merged with its neighbor. So that means we have an update to the municipal boundary layer, and we're working that through our systems. We have some test services up, and we'll be sending out an update notification to folks probably next week as a heads up that's coming. So a lot of stuff going on. We're happy to get all this info out to you guys. And I think that's all I have, Trish. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Brian. I wasn't aware of that merged towns. That's good to know.
I think it's really small. I think it's like population 17 or something.
Yeah, right.
Really tiny.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, next up is a federal report, and that would be me. And I am going to share something that came up at I was talking to Doug Schleifer recently about soils layers, and he suggested I share this with you guys. For those who want to stay in touch and up to date with stuff going on at the federal level, there's Gov Delivery, and I only know about USDA, but I know other agencies use it. But if you just Google it and type in the agency name, it'll come up. And so this is what I got with that results, and then I'm gonna just show you what you can get out of this Gov Delivery website. You can subscribe, and once you subscribe, I guess I'm already subscribed, so thought I had it set up where it was, sorry. Subscription topics, okay, I guess. Yeah, sorry, I thought it was set up where I was already logged in, and I'm not, I am logged in, but I'm not sure how to get to where I was before. But basically, if you want updates from the all of the any soils layers, any news from any federal agencies, this is where you do it, and it'll it'll send you an email, and you can unsubscribe whenever you like. I'll put something in the on the listserv about this when I get the right link. Okay, that's all I have. I'm gonna stop sharing this. Next up would be Dave Tulloch. He did not, for the education constituency group, he did not tell me he had an update, and I'm not sure if he's on, but so we'll just go next to, well, we have a municipal vacancy, which the executive committee is talking about. County constituency group, Joe Smalley did not tell me he had an update, and he's on vacation this week. So the next constituency group is the state group, and Anne Marie Volkowski from DEP had something come up this morning, so she sent me her update, which is that the DEP's 34th annual GIS mapping contest will be held on April 7th at 10 a.m. Maps must be registered by March 21st, and please visit njgov/dep/GIS for more information and to register. That's always a kind of fun event with lots of participation. So if you haven't done that before, you can attend or you can participate, however you want to do it. Something always nice to see. The next constituency group is private, and I didn't hear any updates from Calen, so we'll move on.
Yeah, no updates at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And then the next group is regional and metropolitan planning organizations, and I know that Mark Gaddy told me that he had an update. So Mark, if you're on the line, well, you're
Okay,
you're up.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, first I wanted to say update about DVRPC's land use. We have been doing land use every 5 years since 1990. So that would have made 2020 our last update, but because of the pandemic and everything and the budget questions that came out of that, we have yet to do that. So it has not been updated since 2015. Just to let people know that we hope to have an RFP out by May or June of this year. And it's still up in the air whether we're going to do 2020 to keep it on schedule, or if we're going to do current or like spring 2022. So that's where we're at with that. Jocelyn from the Highlands Council emailed me about their environmental resource inventory or ERI application. I'm just going to read what she has to say. They're about ready to release it. It'll be an online tool that will aid municipalities within the Highlands region. It'll help them create an ERI, and it features online mapping capabilities in addition to the ability to export an ERI report and make custom maps. The application makes a lot of data available from several different sources, all connected with live links. Data is available on a municipal level, in addition to county, watershed, parcel, multi-parcel, and Highlands regional levels. We anticipate a full release in mid-April, and training will be available shortly after that. The application will be available to everyone and not restricted to the municipality use only. And if anybody has any questions, they should reach out to Jocelyn. I will say, again, from a regional view, ERIs are tough. It's a lot of data. We do them for some of our municipalities, and this should be a great tool. I'm really looking forward to it.
Okay, good. Thanks, Mark. That I was not aware of that tool, that what Highlands was up to, but I will be checking that out. All right, let's see what we got next. Next up is a nonprofit group, and Tanya is our rep for that group, but she's presenting, so I'll let her. Unless you have an announcement now, Tanya, do you want to say anything now?
I don't, thanks.
Okay. All right, and our last constituency group is the surveyors, and that is Gary Reenstra. Gary did not tell me he had any updates, so.
No updates at this time.
Okay. All right, so those are 10 constituency groups, and then we have 4 task forces. And the first task force is the Geodetic Task Force, which Edith Kanotka and is our chair, and Gary is the liaison to the executive committee. I don't think they have any updates, so we'll skip them and go to the Elevation Task Force. And Roger Barlow is the chair of that. And I don't know if Roger's on, but I know that Doug said he wanted to give an update.
Oh, he's here. Good morning, New Jersey. I did post a couple of non-elevation things in the chat. One was the USGS Topo Builder function and the address to reach that there. That's an on-demand custom mapping capability using US Topo products. Also, the second one is that NAPE imagery is scheduled to be flown for New Jersey this summer. Last I saw, the pixel resolution was 50 centimeters. So that should be happening this summer. And Trish or I can provide any updates to that. Yep. Elevation work group members, specifically John Tarosky and Doug Schleifer, have been busy doing some coordination work in trying to get the Northeast New Jersey LiDAR funded, and broad agency announcement proposal will be submitted later with the funding if they can gather it all. And that is the 6 or 7 counties in Northeast New Jersey. That's Bergen, Essex, Hudson, Union, Middlesex, and Monmouth. So we'll be looking to collect quality level 1 data there, which is 8 points per square meter. It's still the same RMSEZ, which is 10 centimeters. And the nominal point spacing is improved from the quality level 2, which we had in 2014. And that goes from 0.7 to 0.35 meter point spacing. So one of the items that is happening throughout the nation from FEMA in particular is categorization and an inventory of structures. And of course, quality level 1 is going to really help with infrastructure and other types of things, as John Tarosky has pointed out in his text section on the draft BAA proposal. In addition, stream mapping and other types of activities are better supported with the QL1 data. So the timing on that is usually the announcement from USGS for proposals comes out in the late July, early August timeframe. And that is dependent, of course, to some degree on congressional funding. And for those who keep track of congressional funding, we're about to lapse again a week from tomorrow. So things are dependent on that particular issue. If we are successful, and New Jersey has an excellent record of successful BAA proposals, next leaf-off season, the data would be collected, and that would be 9 years from the 2014 collection, or 8 years, 8 years. And it would be delivered approximately a year later, so that would be 9 years. And that's a fair stretch, so I would expect to see some changes, particularly in the coastal areas of New Jersey. And I want to thank John and Doug for working on that. If there's anything that John or Doug want to add, please do so.
Hi, Roger. It's Doug. I just joined. I just wanted to also add that we're considering a recollection of the DV-RPC counties also next year, those 4 counties. So it would be a combined project to collect the Northeast and the DV-RPC counties.
So that's Mercer, Burlington, Camden, and Gloucester. Yeah. I still remember my New Jersey counties.
Well done. So that would get us to the 2,500 square mile threshold for priority funding or make it a priority project for the 3DEP program. So we're hopeful.
Well, and not coincidentally, it would help with the two large municipal areas, Philadelphia, New York City, and New Jersey. So that's of some importance, I think, from the Homeland Security sector.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roger and Doug. Always lots of updates from Elevation Task Force. The next one is Trails, which Tanya told me she'll give her report before the main presentation. And then our newest task force is the Utilities Public Works Task Force. I did not hear from Dom, but there has been some.
I'm on call.
There.
Yep.
Hi, Dom. Do you have anything
doing,
to
Trish?
report?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have our first meeting tomorrow, actually.
Oh, great.
Yeah, 9:30. So anyone who wants to join join the task force, and you'll be on the list. Okay.
Great.
And looking forward to seeing everyone and hearing everyone tomorrow, 9:30.
Yep. Great. Thanks, Dom. All right. So the next part of our meeting is the open discussion and announcements. And at this point, anyone is welcome to raise your hand, and I can't see the hands, so hopefully somebody will let me know if anybody has any announcements. And we do ask that if there are announcements, you send them to the executive committee secretary, so we have these in the minutes. And then, yeah, you always have the option to contact your constituency representative, and you can find all our names on the forum website. So are there any announcements? I already mentioned the DEP mapping contest, so that's one. I guess not. So that means we can move on to the scheduled speaker presentation, and that we have actually have 3 presenters and an introducer. So Tanya Nolte, who I mentioned a couple times earlier, is going to introduce the speakers, and she'll also give the Trails Task Force update. So Tanya, if you're ready.
I'm ready. Thanks, Trish.
Oh, yep. Okay.
Okay, so my name is Tanya Nolte, and I'm the GIS manager at New Jersey Conservation Foundation, and also one of the co-chairs of the Trails Task Force. First off, I'd like to say thanks for inviting us to give a presentation today. I'll start with a brief update on the status of the task force, and then we'll get into the presentations. So in terms of the work of the task force, I'm very pleased to announce that the first publicly available statewide trails data layer is to be released sometime in the next couple of weeks. And it will be available for download from the DEP's open data portal. This is truly a milestone that we wouldn't have reached without the many people who helped along the way, including my task force co-chair, Brandee Chapman, everybody who participated on the task force, those who contributed data, our partners at Civil Solutions, and everyone who's been just generally supportive of what we've been doing. So thank you to everyone. In terms of the ongoing work of the task force, we've turned our focus to planning and coordinating the process for maintaining and updating the data. A group of task force volunteers met last week, I think it was, to begin the process of planning that process. And if anyone's interested in being involved, please reach out to me and we can roll you into that process. In terms of the data that's about to be publicly released, one thing we do know is that the first iteration is not going to be a complete representation of every trail in the state. So one thing that the task force is hoping to be able to do is to source any missing data, as well as potentially coordinate the mapping of trails that might not yet be currently mapped. So if your organization has trail data that's not included in the first public release, we would definitely like to hear from you. We also hope that our partner contributors will take advantage of the schema template that was designed by the task force so that we can begin to standardize data capture about trail attributes. So I think I'm going to stop here because our presenters are going to talk in more detail about our process to date and our future plans. So we're going to start with a video presentation that Brandee Chapman, my co-chair, pre-recorded for us since she can't be with us today. She'll touch on the work of the task force to date. Then Kalyn Dougherty, an enterprise GIS engineer from Civil Solutions, will describe the process that was used to compile the many disparate trail data sets that we gathered into one, including some of the key decisions that were made and why. And then Sharon Cost, GIS Specialist 2 with the DEP's Green Acres program, will outline our plans for ongoing data maintenance and updates. So if anyone has a question that comes to mind during the presentation, please feel free to pop it in the chat and we'll address them at the end. So bear with me for a moment while I queue up Brandee's presentation here. Okay, here we go.
Hi everyone, my name is Brandee Chapman. I'm Trails Coordinator for the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, and I'm so excited to talk to you about the forthcoming New Jersey Statewide Trails Geodatabase, which is a product of the work done by the New Jersey Trails Task Force. The GIS community and many others have been talking about the need for a statewide trail layer for years. As of right now, there is no authoritative central place to access public trail locations online. Many independently owned websites offer information, but it's often crowdsourced and therefore inaccurate. This new data set comes from known and trusted sources only and does not include any crowdsourced information, making it unique and important. This trail inventory was one of the primary goals of the New Jersey Trails Plan, and will also help attain many of the other goals therein, such as creating a statewide planning tool to improve New Jersey's trail network. Having this data means users can identify major trail gaps to create a statewide network of trail and greenways, which is currently happening on a regional level. It will also help identify areas of focus for New Jersey and help attain specific goals of the New Jersey Trail Plan, including creating a list of top 10 trail priorities, having a trail within 10 minutes of every resident, especially focusing on our overburdened communities, and creating non-motorized connection to neighborhoods, schools, workplaces, and public destinations. It can also be used to promote environmental justice initiatives. This can be done by using the Statewide Trails Geodatabase in concert with the Office of Environmental Justice's GIS layer to target funding and planning efforts for trail and greenway development in our overburdened communities. It can also be used to look at a trail's proximity to public transportation in consideration of those who cannot drive, further ensuring equitable access. The data will also help expedite search and rescue efforts. First responders in New Jersey never had and historically needed a reliable data set of trails to find lost hikers. Now they will have it. The data also provides a tool for safety improvements. Transportation organizations need to know where trails cross roads to review current conditions of safety features, like crosswalks, signage, and signals, so they can prioritize areas in need of attention. Some groups are currently manually creating a point layer in GIS to inventory all these trail crossings, but as you can imagine, it's a slow and painful process. This data set would do that work for them, and in the end, we get safer trails for everyone. The beginnings of this data set started once the New Jersey Geospatial Forum created a Trails Task Force in 2017. This new task force was charged with the mission of developing a process for creating and maintaining a statewide data set of trails. The idea was not to start from scratch and create new data, but to take advantage of a recent increase in trail mapping and gather existing data all together in one place for public use. Here's a snapshot of who was involved with the task force, and although it's not a complete list, you can see that it was a huge team effort. So now I'll go into the work of the task force. The first step was research. We wanted to apply lessons learned by others who've already done this work. So we reached out to GIS professionals in other states to learn about data collection, data editing, update and maintenance strategies, and any challenges they faced along the way. Next, our definitions and attributes team made recommendations about the types of trails and the trail information we wanted to capture. When we were deciding which trail use types to include, our goal was to allow as much room as possible for a wide range of trails. We also elected to include off-road vehicle trails, provided they've been officially designated as such. And we decided to include road sections if they were official links between off-road trails. In terms of the attributes about trails to be included, our goal was to capture everything here if provided. And we also wanted to have an idea of how accurate the data was. So we wanted to capture information about who supplied us with the data, how they mapped their trails, and when they did it. So we would know how up to date the information was and how accurate it might be. We do have a schema where all of these attributes are described in more detail. After the schema was developed, we moved on to planning a process for compiling all these different data sets into one. DEP then secured federal recreational trails program funding so we can move from this conceptual planning stage right into implementation. And here's a breakdown of the implementation phase right up to today. Starting in May 2020, we got to work on outreach and initiated the data collection effort. At the same time data was being collected, we developed an RFP for a vendor to do the work of compiling the data using an existing GIS services contract. While the data trickled in, Civil Solutions was selected as the successful bidder. DEP staff conducted a kickoff meeting with Civil Solutions in May of 2021. Then they got to work. They analyzed the data and compiled everything into a Geodatabase format, and Calen will go into more detail about that process in a minute. But for now, this is what we have. You may notice a lot of white spaces on the map, and this could be for one of three reasons. One is that we didn't get data from the sources we reached out to. Two is that trails may exist but are not yet mapped. And three, trails might not exist there. Sharon will talk about how we plan on filling these data gaps later, but as of now, we have 3,741 miles of mapped public trails all in one place. Well, that's it for me today. Thanks for having me, and it was my pleasure to give you some basic background information on the project. We hope you are as excited about the data set as we are. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions you might have, and keep an eye out for it soon. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to throw to Calen.
All right, great. Let me share my screen here. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so hi everyone, my name's Kalyn Dougherty. I'm an enterprise GIS engineer with Civil Solutions. And as Brandee said, Civil Solutions was the firm who did the primary work on the trails of compiling the data and doing the GIS data development. So what I wanted to go through today was just kind of that process, some of the challenges we faced, and then just kind of how we approached them and an overview of the whole process from beginning to end. So as Brandee indicated, the project overview, the goal of this project was statewide trail conflation. We don't want to start from scratch creating trails. We want to take advantage of already existing data, and we want to migrate that data into a master schema that was developed by the Trails Task Force. And Brandee highlighted all the different benefits that a single data set would have. And I'm sure anyone who's ever worked in GIS knows the benefit of working with a single data source in a consistent, clean schema rather than multiple different data sets with different schemas, different standards, things like that. So I think that the potential benefits of a layer like this are pretty clear. So the source data that was gathered and provided to us consisted of 41 data sets, a little over 14,000 line features, came from a wide variety of agencies, county, local, it could be land stewards, nonprofits. Anyone who had any potential trail data could have been someone who contributed to this. So one thing to take note is, there could be highly variable schemas depending on the agencies. With 41 different data sets, you're going to have a lot of differences of how data is filled out, how it was collected, and how complete it was. You might have some things that were done professionally, other things that were done done with field GPS, other things just heads up digitized, all sorts of different sources. And we know that there's going to be duplicate features between the data sets. And what I mean by that is there's going to be trails that are represented in two or more data sets, and it'd be the same trail. So a county might have a data set that might have tried to include all the trails in the county when they did it, and they might have included trails managed by a land conservancy, and that land conservancy might have its own GIS layer that also has some of those same trails. So noting this, we wanted to think about how we were going to approach this when we were going to have to basically pick a feature when there are two different options. So our initial approach is, we wanted to have a consistent methodology for how we were going to pick one data set over another in instances where there was duplicates. If there's not duplicates, then we're just going to take whatever is available, load it as best we can into the schema. And that's, somewhat at least straightforward from a general perspective. Could get a little trickier once you get into the schema and the mapping, but from a general perspective, it's going to be easy to pick a trail when there's only one option. If there's two options, so with the same trail, two different data sorts, two different data sets, we want to look at it, and after some discussion, we decided we wanted to prioritize the features where the attributes are most filled out and appear to be of the highest quality. A potential situation could be there's two different data sources. One looks like it might be a little more spatially accurate, but it has less attributes. The other one may not quite be as accurate spatially, but it has more full high quality attributes. Our thought is bring in the one with the higher quality attributes because that better describes the trail and will lead to better completeness for the data set. Other things that's taken into consideration is the data currency and the source. So how recently was it collected? How was it collected? And then the data source is the data source coming from the land steward that manages the trail? In that case, it might be more accurate from another party that collected the data. So all of those things were going to be considerations when we took a look at trails that were represented in different data sets. And we also wanted to limit the editing because really we wanted to allow future updates to come from the data stewards and the trail data sources themselves. So as Brandee indicated, we didn't want to really be creating features from scratch or making huge changes. We wanted to be, developing a 1.0 data set that will hopefully be augmented in the future. So that was our approach there. So we did after some discussion with the stakeholders, we did a pilot and we chose Morris County. We chose Morris County because it is a diverse data set, several different data sources from the county, from nonprofits, from other institutions, and a manageable amount of data. a decent amount of trails, but not so much that it's overwhelming for a pilot, but enough to give at least a diverse data set to work with that will hopefully highlight some of the things that we would encounter across the rest of the state. So after doing the pilot and submitting the data back to the stakeholders, having the stakeholder review, we refined our approach. Didn't change drastically, but we noticed some things we wanted to definitely keep an eye on and do in the production data. So initially, we were thinking about doing. We wanted to do a topology to get rid of dangles and snap some trails that almost intersect but don't quite. We realized we could only really do a fine topology of, on the order of a foot or so, or 2 feet around, something around that. No topology where we're going to do 50 feet or 20 feet, just because that would collapse too many nodes of the trails that have finer data collection where there was a lot more vertices. So it just really wasn't. It would be too much collapsing of data and losing too much data integrity to try to do a larger topology. We also wanted to take note of merging of trails only where all of the attributes were identical. So one of the thoughts of the approaches was, if source A submits trails and they have the blue trail and it's broken into 10 different segments, we probably want to merge that together so we can get a representation of the blue trail as it is as a whole. But upon doing the pilot, we realized, if the blue trail is paved for a section and then is unpaved for a section, we really want to preserve that. So let's only look at merging trails where all of the attributes, all of the important attributes, are identical. And our overlapping segment approach, I'll talk a little bit about that later, but that is where two trails that traverse the same area overlap. So I'll talk about how we looked at that. We realized the importance of robust notes and description fields, since there's so many different data sets and so many different schemas and ways that things could be represented. We wanted to make sure that in a final data set, if there was some kind of anomaly or something important, that we took note of it so that in the future, it could be handled consistently in the data. So just very important to keep robust notes and robust description fields. And mark for data steward review. Again, we really would like the edits to come from the data stewards themselves. So if we notice some kind of deficiency, we don't want to data shame anyone and say your data is bad, because we're sure that these agencies are doing the best they can with the times and budgets they have. But hopefully we can mark it so that if they do continue to update this data, that they can see areas to make improvements and make the data better for themselves and then better for the statewide layer. So in diving into the data, there's, the way to do this from a production standpoint was pretty manual process of just a heads up review of the different data sets. There's no way to, with 41 different data sets, there's no real automated way to do everything. And also, we really wanted that that human touch of reviewing the data and seeing what we thought the best data sets to bring in were. Because honestly, we had good guidance for how we want to bring it in, but it still is kind of subjective from a data selection standpoint. So, ultimately decisions are going to have to be made and justifications are going to have to be made based on the best outlines we can make. But we want to, when we do it, we want to document why we did it, just to keep everything consistent. And we're going to just start working through the data on a county by county basis and loading it into a staging database. Basically, this would be an append with field mapping. Sometimes be very straightforward, and other times there would need to be a little more data manipulation to bring the source data into the master schema. So I want to highlight a few things we ran into in the data and how we approached them. One thing was multiple blaze colors in a single feature. So in the schema, there's a blaze color field that would denote the blaze of the trail. We noticed some trails in the source data would have multiple blaze colors. So you can see green/white, red/white. There was a thought, maybe we wanted to break these out and keep only a single color in the blaze, but ultimately decided to keep it simpler. We'll allow multiple blaze colors in the in that field because that is something you can encounter in the field. You could have a blaze on a trail that is split between two colors. Another thing that I mentioned before, different trails covering the same traverse. So on this screenshot, you can see the yellow trail highlighted is the nature trail. And then if I forward it here, you can see the yellow trail now is the canal trail. And they both share that traverse that goes from southeast to northwest. And this is something that's kind of common in like a park or an area with a large network of trails. If anyone's ever gone out and hiked an area like that, you know that there's probably several loops of trails and several different lengths of trails, and often a small trail, a small loop will spur off of a bigger loop and then come back. So the nature trail and the canal trail share that one stretch. We after discussion and determination with stakeholders, said that this is okay for these features to overlap. In terms of looking at the data, if you want to look at the nature trail, you want to search the attributes or display it on a map. You want to see the entire traverse. It would just make it more complicated if we started to break these up and not allow overlapping features, because really it's about the trails themselves, and this overlap is something that does occur in the field, so we'll allow this in the data and not consider it a duplicate or an error. The multi-part features, depending on the data set, some of the data set came in like this, where you would have just multi-part features, multiple lines that when you select are all the same feature. Ideally, we would have, trails would only represent a single loop or would be defined by name or things like that. But that's just not always the case with how the trails are collected. So for something like this, we would just take note in one of our notes fields that this is a multi-part feature. Maybe in the future, there would be an opportunity to break this up if there was some sort of attributes of the different trails, but just something we wanted to note for this version of the database. Sidewalks and paths in county parks. Some of the submissions that came from the more urban areas in the northern part of the state, a lot of their data is from county parks that might not have as many traditional, what we think of like wilderness hiking trails. This makes sense from their data management perspective because this is probably areas that they maintain, it's county property. But really, when you look at something like this, it's a little different than just a trail loop in the woods here, where you have every little piece of sidewalk in a county park. Maybe there's one area that is a walking loop, but the rest of it, would you really consider it a trail? Again, we just wanted to note this as best we could and highlight this in the data, so that ultimately, if we wanted to, exclude it from future data sets or things like that, that it would be easy to do so. So it's really just another note of something that would happen when you bring in data sets from all across the state, and from urban to suburban to more rural areas. You're going to have the different data stewards have different data that constitutes a trail depending on where they are. So really for us, it was just in terms of data process, it was just another thing to note so that it would be easy to find in the data and consistently noted. And then bike lanes, some of the data sources included bike lanes that are on just road right-of-ways. Again, this is just something that ultimately in a trail data set, maybe this is not something we want to include. It's not really a bike path. It is a bike lane on a road. So this is just something to note. And sometimes this was easy to note because the bike lanes were a separate layer. Other times it was took a little more of looking into the attributes and seeing how they had things structured to note these. And then dense areas with multiple data sources. This screenshot. You can see the different colors represent 3 different data sources. this is going to be was more prevalent in rural areas of the state, like Sussex, Morris County, Hunterdon County, areas like that, Warren County, because obviously those are going to have more of the traditional hiking trails. They're going to be represented in multiple data sets, so this is where we really have to dig into the data and see which ones we want to bring in and why, and then justify it and note maybe what other data sources are available if there ends up being an issue later, or if new data sets come in. Just note as best we can what data sources there are, and just use our priorities that I described before to make the best decision for what to bring in. So after this was done, just did QA/QC processes to just clean up the data for the schema and then load it into a final layer for a deliverable. Also, as with any data submitted to the state, with metadata creation, with this, one of the important parts of the metadata was there's an extensive contact list in the metadata, so that hopefully people can, for a given trail of a given area, figure out who was responsible for providing that data, because ultimately there were so many different data sources used in the compilation of this data. This is what we ended up with, and Brandee showed the screenshot of it earlier. She highlighted the miles. Just from a GIS perspective, we went from 14,000 features down to something around 6,000 just by eliminating the duplicates in certain areas and merging. And with the merging, it should make features easier to work with and make the data set cleaner. And now this will be easy to identify gaps. So Brandee highlighted that, identifying gaps from a policy and a environmental justice, but also highlighting data gaps. If you know that there are trails in a certain county and you don't see any in this layer, then you know that that's where we have to reach out to get more data to fill in those areas. And ultimate takeaways, just that consistency is important. It was important because with so many different data sets, we were never going to get just 100% everything matching, just appended in without doing anything. So we knew that it was going to be important to just adhere to consistent methodologies and the justifications, so that when the data set is in its 1.0 and it's in its first production form, that things are as consistent as they can possibly be. And then aligning methodologies with the goal and the scope of the project. Again, sometimes as GIS professionals, I feel like we can get kind of lost in the data, but ultimately we need to take a step back and say, what is this for? What is the goal of this project? So we want to bring all these trails together, and we don't want to let a small issue derail the project, because we know that with so many data sources, it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be a great starting point. And I think something like this will help foster future collaboration, because with this layer starting to go out there, starting to be shared, starting to be an important resource, hopefully some of the data gaps, the data stewards that manage those areas will be more likely to share their data and see the benefit. If they have trails, but there's neighboring trails that cross in or are very close to their boundary, maybe they could see the benefit of having their data loaded to this layer and getting surrounding data as well. So I think it will hopefully be an important tool to foster some future collaboration between a bunch of different agencies. And that's it for the GIS data development portion, and I'll give it back to Tanya.
Thanks, Calen. Sharon, you're up.
Sharon, you're muted.
Thank you. All right, so I'm guessing everybody can see my screen, I'm hoping.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to be talking about the maintenance and the updates of the statewide trails database. And oh, I actually hit the wrong button. So sorry. All right, I'm just still trying to get myself set here. Sorry. Missing something here. Okay. So as was said earlier, we're going to include all trails throughout New Jersey, state, county, municipal, nonprofit, federally owned or managed, and we're not looking for submissions of crowdsourced trails. It should preferably be from managers or trail owners.
Sharon, you muted yourself again.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure out why I'm having technical problems here. Okay, here we go. All right, so I don't know when I remuted, but I'm going to talk about the maintenance and the updates of the statewide trails database. And we want to include state, county, municipal, nonprofit, and federally managed trails, but we're not looking for crowdsourced data sets. It should preferably be from managers or trail owners. We're currently looking for volunteers to help provide updates and maintenance to the statewide.
Sharon, you're muted again. Not sure what's.
I'm not sure why that keeps happening. Hold on a second.
But you're good now.
Okay. I think it happens every time I try to advance my slide. Hold on
Yeah.
a second. I practiced this and it worked, and now it's not reacting properly. All right, I'm gonna have to manually use my mouse to do it. So just going back, we're looking for volunteers and to help with the maintenance and the updates. And we believe the best way to proceed with this maintenance is to establish 4 volunteer teams. Each team will have a chair or a lead. And aside from the GIS work involved, we are expecting the rest of the work to be minimal or low burden on each person. Here are the 4 teams. Now, there will be a regional team, a data discovery team, a data creation team, and a GIS editing team. As you can see, we approximated how many of these volunteers we think we're going to need. However, that could conceivably change after things get started. So here's a flow chart that shows the basic structure of how the volunteer teams will work. The DEP team will be the main hub from which everything flows out of and then back into. The GIS team will be working exclusively with the DEP team, while the regional team will work with not only the DEP team, but as the discovery and the creation team as well. Next, we will delve into the specific duties for each team. Now, remember, this is just our starting point. As I said before, we expect this process to evolve and adjust as the teams get comfortable with their duties. Open communication from all the volunteers will help determine the best workflow. Okay. There will be 3 regional teams made up of volunteers for the north, central, and southern regions of the state. Because everything will be done remotely, it is not necessary to live in the region that you volunteer for. But if you're most familiar or have contacts in the particular region, it might make sense for you to sign up for that region. We are hoping to start out as a team of 6 with 2 volunteers assigned to each region. And this team will be the DEP's primary point of contact for all the trail data contributors in their respective regions. Okay, so the role of the regional teams will be to manage the process of an annual outreach for updated data or get confirmation of no changes since the last update. And they'll also be responsible for maintaining a list of data sources with current contact information, including any new sources provided by the discovery team, which I'll go over in a minute. Now, this is the regional team's workflow process. And DEP will provide each region a checkout of their data set to be distributed. Then every January, the teams will put in a request to collect the checkouts and give the data contributors a deadline for response. And for data contributors that don't receive checkouts for whatever reason, we will determine their updates on a case-by-case basis, but it will primarily fall on the GIS editing team. Teams will follow up as needed and return updated checkouts and other data sets to the DEP team for integration into the statewide trails data set. I'm sure it's probable that some data sets will not have any changes. For the data discovery team, we would suggest 3 to 5 volunteers to begin with, but again, this could change based on need. The timeline for work would be ongoing, meaning any time a member of the data discovery team hears about or learns of a potential new data source, they would share the process for submitting new data, gather baseline information via the data intake form, and forward information to the regional team member before the next data outreach, which would be January through February. If the team discovers a potential new source who does not have their trails mapped, they would be referred to the data creation team as soon as possible. All right, and their duties would involve scouting new potential data sources and collect information about the data via the data intake form. They will also supply regional teams with information for any new data contributors to be added to the contact list and follow a developed process for receiving new data from new contributors. And lastly, notify the creation team if the trails are not mapped. So here's the first draft of the data intake form, which could morph and develop over time as we move along, but it will still look basically the same. All we're doing with the form is gathering agency information, points of contact, and some baseline information about the data they'll be submitting. The data discovery team will maintain a repository of these intake forms. So now we'll talk about the data creation team. This team will be responsible for collecting information about known trails that are missing from the statewide data set and coordinating mapping efforts where needed. The discovery of missing data could be done through a trail data survey questionnaire sent to county planners, county park directors, open space committees, nonprofit organizations, and other potential landowner who manages trails that are open to the public. This questionnaire will simply ask about known gaps in trail data and request possible points of contact. Next, the data creation team will reach out to potential new data contributors and gauge mapping needs. This could be done through another form of questionnaire, which would get baseline information about the land or trail manager or agency and their capability to map trails and steward the data if it is not being done already. Based on responses to this survey, the data creation team will come up with an action plan. If the new contributor already has trail data, they would be referred to the data discovery team to complete the data intake form and learn about the process for submitting data. So these are the 3 phases of work which the data creation team will follow. First, they gather information. Then, based on the information in the trail or land manager questionnaire, the team will forward information for existing data to the data discovery team or create an action plans to create trail data suited to each trail manager's current needs and abilities. So a scenario 1 where the landowner or the trail manager has staffing, equipment, and the ability to create their own trail data, then someone from our trails team will provide the schema that we're using and the new data intake form, request a time frame for the completion of the mapping, and pass on information to the discovery team. But in scenario 2, let's say the landowner or trails manager has no mapping capability or equipment, then the creation team will coordinate with the Forest Fire Service staff and state police search and rescue and a regional team volunteer to create trail data in accordance with the Trails Task Force schema. Lastly, the data creation team will also provide new contributor contact information to the discovery team to complete the data intake form. Then this new data contributor information would get passed to the appropriate regional team to be added to the contact list in time for the annual outreach. This brings us to the GIS editing team, which will work exclusively with DEP team during the annual update timeframe of February through April. This team will obviously need a GIS background. And because this phase will require the most time from volunteers, we're exploring the idea of reaching out to Rutgers or Rowan University to see if we can use students to help, which just might be a better idea than asking for volunteers from full-time GIS specialists. The February through April schedule seems like it would coordinate well with a semester, And so we just want to see if this idea plays out before accepting volunteers who are already working full time. So here's a quick summary showing the workflow of everything. January through February, teams will conduct data outreach by collecting the checkouts, other updated data sets, and new data sets if available. February through April, DEP will check in the checkouts, while the GIS team will conflate other updated data sets that are collected, as well as new trails data by fitting them into a staging geodatabase with a statewide trail schema. They will also have to check the topology and standardize the attributes by following an established document of rules. April through May, the DEP team will perform checks and reviews of the topology and attributes to make sure everything is correctly standardized, and will then load the updates into statewide trails dataset. May through June, the DEP team will publish the updated dataset, and June through July, DEP team will submit new checkouts so the cycle can start all over again. Oh, I think I went too far ahead. Okay, I'll show this one more time just so you can see the overall structure again. As you can see, 3 teams will work closely together, with the regional teams being the primary point of contact for DEP. The GIS team works exclusively with DEP during the data processing phase. I'll mention again that the more volunteers, the better. You're welcome to volunteer for one or more team if you think you can handle the workload. If you're obviously not permanently committed, and we appreciate any help that anybody can offer. So what's next? We did just add Ocean County's trails, so that will be included in the first version that goes out soon, and Fish and Wildlife as well. And Monmouth County will be submitting their trails soon, so we promise them that we will add them this year. However, if there's other submissions, all I can say is we'll do our best. No promises though, sorry. We're hoping to release the first version of the dataset next week at the earliest, if not the second week. You'll be able to find it on New Jersey's DEP open data site. Simply type in NJDEP open data on your web browser, and then trails in the search toolbar there. And basically, right now there's only one trails data set, which is Parks and Forestries. So when it's up, you'll see another one there. And once you find it, it will be a downloadable geodatabase with metadata. If you have trouble finding it, just contact us. Or if you have data to contribute, questions to ask, or want to be involved, contact us. There's 3 of us, as you can see, me, Heather, and Tanya. We make up the GIS portion of the DEP team, and will directly be handling the update and maintenance of the data set going forward. Also with the help of Craig Koutros whenever we need him. And we also want to send a big thank you to everyone who volunteered on this Trails Task Force, who helped shape this to get it going, as well as all the data contributors, and especially Civil Solutions for helping us create the initial version we're about to release. We also want to thank everyone asking for the data, because there wouldn't be a need for it without you. All right. Thank you. And that would,
Sharon.
yeah.
So,
All right. Thank you, Sharon and Calen and Brandee and Tanya. I don't know if I don't see any questions in the chat, but now is your chance to ask any, if you have any. I actually thought it was great. The details that Calen gave were nice and specific, and Brandee thank her for doing her video ahead of time, and also she gave a nice introduction to the project. And then Sharon, I thought her stuff was really nice to see how we're going to move forward with this. Good, a lot of work went into it, and what I really like is this is the kind of end result of a task force of the forum. So good stuff. Yeah, looking forward to getting the data to our teams. Thank you again, Tanya. All right. Okay, so we are, yeah, at the end of our meeting here, I am going to give everyone, if anyone has any last minute announcements or questions, you can put them in the chat or raise your hand. We'll take that. We had a nice turnout for the meeting today, 92 participants at one point, so that's good. Our next meeting will be in June 1st, and we will be talking about, we have an executive committee meeting this afternoon, so whether we'll be back in person or back online, or maybe a hybrid, something like that, we'll figure it out and we'll let you know. Thank you everyone for participating, and definitely don't forget to get in touch with your constituency group rep if you have any questions or comments for us. All right, thanks again.
Thanks, Trish.
Yep.
Thank you.